Oh, but that was this is.
So, good evening and welcome to Media Reporter. I'm Howard Homonoff, your host, and this is a bit of a reboot for the program as we're about to engage in a series of programs looking at a range of the changes going on in the media and communications industries today. And as our guest today, I really can't think of anybody better to start with than Randy Milch, who is the Executive Vice President, General Counsel, Executive Vice President of Public Policy and General Counsel of Verizon Communications. Randy, welcome.
Thank you, Howard,
for agreeing to be here out of your busy schedule.
It's a pleasure, Howard.
Thank you. So I thought, our audience will consist certainly of people in the law school and legal community, and a great place to start, I think, would be just take us a bit through the journey, right? The backbencher in Professor Hogan's contracts class on to the prestigious General Counsel of Verizon, kind of a bit of how you got here and a mix of plan and circumstance.
I think that's the right way to put it, a mix of plan and circumstance. I think that I had a wonderful stint of 3 years at NYU Law School, and where we were classmates, and then went on to clerk for a year, and then, as so many do, ended up as a litigator in Washington, D.C., which I thought was the be-all and end-all of the legal profession at the time, and was a partner in a law firm there. And then one day got a phone call from a former colleague who asked me to represent them in a matter. And this was the then C&P Telephone Company of Maryland, which was one of the baby bells of the baby bells, one of the offspring of the baby bells. And I, of course, thought I was being hired as outside counsel and thought this was a great coup, and was quickly informed, no, I had to come work for the company because this was too important to entrust to outside counsel. And it was one of the first competition cases back in 1993, which is an age ago, and more than an age ago in the telecommunications industry, where a smaller competitor wanted to have the local regulator force the C&P Telephone Company to share its facilities, its physical facilities. And as I said, this was 1993, so before the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which really altered the landscape legally. I went home, spoke with my wife, who said, sure, go ahead, I don't care. And that was basically it. I left the law firm and became a staff lawyer at the C&P Telephone Company. We did well in that case. We did the...
Luckily.
Well,
because it brought you to where you are today, this particular interview.
It's an important lesson on strategy. We lost, but we lost the right way. It was not going to be politically possible to win, but we lost in a way that was effective for the company. Right. Let's put it that way. And I became the general counsel of that company about 6 months later, and then very close on to that, the 1996 Act passed, and as I said, absolutely changed the landscape. So, long story short, a career doing regulatory work. And then in 2000, in 1997, we had a merger between Bell Atlantic and NYNEX, and then we had another merger between Bell Atlantic and GTE, and that created Verizon in 2000. And at that point, I left the regulatory part of the business, of the legal part of the business, because my feeling was that we were going to become deregulated, and that regulatory work was going to take less and less of the time. And it would be more important to be a business unit general counsel, which I became the general counsel of the telco, and then was able to use that and become general counsel of our global provider when we purchased MCI. Came with that as the largest globally interconnected internet backbone in the world belonged to MCI, so that became part of Verizon. And we provide services in over 150 countries, so I had a very interesting international experience and government experience out of that, and then in 2008 became the general counsel of Verizon.
Okay, so Randy, give people a sense of what it's like being the general counsel of a Fortune, 15 company, and kind of the breadth of what obviously must cross your plate from day to day, week to week, et cetera.
So it's a great job. It's a lot of fun and it's very interesting. It's one that is most interesting because of, as you can imagine, the breadth of the items that cross your plate. It really comes in two flavors. The first flavor is the fact that as a Fortune 15 company, which we're very proud and honored to be, anything that affects corporations in America or abroad affects us. So as a very big corporation, it affects us first. And so we have issues that are, I would term, general corporate issues, but they range from taxation to employment. We have 190,000 employees around the globe, services in all these countries. So anywhere there's a change in sort of general corporate attitude, general corporate issues, and we've seen many of them here in the United States in the last 4 years, affect us. So the full gamut of issues, from SEC issues to Department of Labor issues to you name any of the alphabet soup of regulators or laws passed recently, we're very deeply affected. So there's that part, and then there's the part that arises simply from the particular business that we are in. So which of course creates its own set of issues, legal, regulatory drama from day to day. And we happen to be in an industry that is, both vitally important to the country, but vitally important to our nation's economy. The telecommunications industry and the information services industry is a real bright spot in our economy during the downturn that began in 2008 and persists to this day. A level of investment that is higher than almost any other investment of any industry. And Verizon has been at the forefront of that. So, there's been a lot of activity around telecommunications. So it falls into those two broad buckets.
And you started as a litigator.
I started as a
sort of
litigator.
in post school, et cetera. Is that still, where do you sort of find yourself spending the most time or most juiced about? Is it still kind of going back to litigation, or is it?
No.
I never want to have anything to do with litigation and get me the other stuff where I can.
No, I think that to me it is what is most strategically important at the time. So you have to come at all of these issues knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, and you're paid to have judgment and an opinion. And you have to decide where your judgment and your opinion is going to be worth more and worth less. And I've had quite a lot of extra litigation, outside of litigation experience since 2000, doing the business counsel work and the other work. So I feel as though I've slowly gained some right to have some opinions in some of these other areas. I have a tremendous team, so that is the saving aspect of my job, is that I have such a tremendous team. So whether it's in the litigation area, whether it's in the regulatory area, public policy, which I oversee now, or the Washington issues, the global issues, I have go-to people who are very, very good at what they do, have a lot of good judgment. We can sit down and talk, and we can form policies and form strategies, which is where I'm sort of come in. So I don't shy away from one area or the other. I know where I know very little, and that's where it's important to have good people helping you and helping you lead the way.
One of the things that I've always talked is, as having been a lawyer and then business roles within companies, that I've often talked about with lawyers, is that law school doesn't teach you very much about managing people. It's much more obviously focused on learning the law and the processes and sort of the way of thinking about the law. But how did you get good at, I'm going to presume you're good at this.
I thank you for that.
How do you get good at managing, how many lawyers do you have?
About 400,
okay,
a little less than 400.
So managing what is a significantly sized law firm or group of lawyers, but with a different role, right. You're serving the interests of the company. How do you get good at that?
Well, I think that, and thank you very much for presuming that I have some capabilities in this regard. I mean, actually, we have the whole team now is quite a bit larger than just the lawyers. We have the security folks, and we have the public affairs folks, and public policy folks. So it's over 1,000 folks that are in the team now. I think there's no substitute for actually learning it. I've had these debates with people about whether you can teach leadership. You can you teach leadership skills? Can you do that? I profess, despite the fact that I've been told repeatedly that you can do it. My own view, frankly, is that you have to be put in the situations and you have to be mentored, but you have to be mentored when you're in the situation. That the academic sort of way of teaching leadership is by its very nature interesting, generally taught by people who don't, and that is, you know, sort of one of the deficits. Now, you know, there's no substitute for being put in charge of a team. That's the essence of it. And how do you lead a team, and how do you get the best out of people, and how do you deal with the interpersonal issues, and how do you deal with their competency issues, and how do you drive results on a team-based basis. So I had the opportunity, both as a litigator in private practice, where, you know, you're the senior associate or the junior partner. You're really, that's one of your jobs, is really running a team. If it's a big team litigation, that's sort of your sweet spot. And then again, when we, for instance, after the 1996 Act passed, there was just a huge spurt of litigation that happened across all of the then Bell Atlantic 7 states, and we had litigation in each of those states simultaneously that was very important as a predicate for us getting into the long distance market, a market that now doesn't really exist, but it was very important at the time. And so you had that opportunity to organize teams and then move up a level and not be just in the team running the team, but running teams of teams, right? And figuring out how to move the ball forward, set policy, do the kind of on-the-ground work you needed to do to make sure that things were coming along. I know that there are people who have studied this and have ways of expressing what to me
Even
is
what they call whole business schools.
Right, whole business schools that are sort of ineffable to me, but I think that there's no substitute for the experience, and I think that there are people who can do it and there are people who can't do it. I just think that there is, and I thank you for the supposition that I can do it. But
well, one of the things you were just mentioning was sort of that all the time and effort and strategic importance of going after a market like long distance, right? Which, by the way, as you say, doesn't really exist anymore. It certainly doesn't exist anywhere near the fashion. So tell people a little bit of a sense of Verizon today. Everybody knows their own interaction with I'm a customer or they're the local phone company, but kind of, you know, bigger picture here, what's Verizon today? What really matters to its business? Well,
you know, so we have over 90 million wireless customers, and so many people know us. The most people know us as their wireless carrier. We're at the forefront of the wireless industry here in the United States. Verizon Wireless is without a doubt the leader in the wireless industry on any set of metrics, on its investment, on its technology. You know, we led the move to 4G LTE. We're way ahead of everyone else on its plans, and it's certainly on the quality of its network, which has no equal. So that is the most visible, I think, across the country, across the nation aspect of our company. But we also, of course, have in the Northeast, in the Mid-Atlantic, in Florida, Texas, and California, we have over 20 million landline customers, 20 landline voice customers. These are the landline remnants of the three companies that sort of came together, NYNEX, Bell Atlantic, and GTE, to form Verizon. We again have led the way on fiber to the home service, our so-called FiOS service, which, you know, garners top honors from J.D. Power and the like, and is continually taking market share from its cable competitors. We're an overbuilder, so we brought these services on top of the cable companies, who were all chopped up into their little geographic fiefdoms. And that is we have about 4.5 million FiOS data customers, a little over 5 million here. I have these written down so I won't forget them. 5.6 million FiOS customers. So we have a large group of almost 9 million broadband customers as well. And that's the sort of the domestic lay of the land. And finally, we have a global enterprise company, Verizon Enterprise Solutions, which, as I said, provides service to most of the Fortune 1000, over a majority of the Global 2000, and provide services in over 150 countries via our network, our globally interconnected fiber and undersea network. We have a very strong data, cloud services business, security services business. Our strategic services on the VES side have grown in revenue, even as the general enterprise downturn has dampened enterprise spending across the globe. This aspect of our business continues to rise in the cloud and in security and machine-to-machine enterprises, which is the globally connected Internet of Things.
Right. The intertubes, I believe they're called. Is that right?
Well, I think that
wasn't that the Ted Stevens?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, it's the Internet of everything,
Yeah,
and soon your dishwasher will speak to your hot water heater and let it know it needs a little more water.
Right.
But all those aspects together make up today's Verizon. I mean, most people don't know how globally interconnected, what kind of global services we have with our customers all across the globe, and where they're very familiar with Verizon Wireless and also very familiar with Verizon Landline Fios services.
Right. Well, I want to go back. In the midst of all that is that what used to be the old core of Bell Atlantic /9X/GTE of being kind of the utility. And I'm particularly interested in, we sort of, the word utility and losing utilities, hit everybody so hard in this area, particularly around Sandy last fall. Just talk a little bit and give people a sense of sort of, as you're at, command center, et cetera, what it was like dealing with a company where I assume you had millions of customers who all of a sudden didn't have access to services that they're used to getting from you, and interacting with public safety officials, et cetera. What was that like?
Well, it didn't rise up to millions, but that's but it was plenty.
Okay,
it was plenty.
Good.
Sandy did hit us, as it did everyone, pretty hard. It hit us obviously in Lower Manhattan. It hit us out in the lower reaches of Brooklyn and Queens, and the barrier islands out to Fire Island, and then on the Jersey Shore, the barrier islands down the Jersey Shore as well. And while it was a horrific disaster for so many of our customers, and Verizon, as it usually does, ran to that crisis and was very instrumental in, we would send our disaster trucks out, which would provide people with internet access, and they could come in and file their FEMA claims and get recharged and all that kind of stuff. Part of the general outpouring, I think, of assistance, the mutual assistance that happened. We did have a very significant, and in some areas still have a significant rebuilding effort that we are undergoing. At the time of the Sandy hit, I was down at our headquarters here at 140 West Street down in Lower Manhattan on the day before, with all the preparedness that was going on, and no one really knew how high the tide would come in and how far it would go. But by the middle of that night, 3 o'clock in the morning, there were 4 or 5 feet of water running through the lobby of 140 West Street.
Which is a beautiful historic building for people who have never seen it.
It is, and in fact,
gorgeous.
It was in the New York Times. There was an article in the New York Times about the restoration of the lobby and the murals there just recently. And 4 feet in the lobby means that the multiple sub-basements where the cables are, they were by necessity flooded. And I was back down very early the next morning as we were pulling together the efforts to begin the restoration downtown. And we very quickly that day sort of came to the conclusion among the senior folks that at least in Lower Manhattan, this was a very good opportunity to take the 2 principal switching offices that were affected. That's 140 West Street and also a very major switching office in Broad Street. And in Broad Street, take out 100% of the copper and make it an all-fiber switching center, which is the largest switching center that's ever been turned into an all-fiber switching center. And in 140 West Street, wherever the copper was damaged, which was a very large proportion of the copper, transfer all that to fiber as well. So we took the we seized an opportunity in the rebuilding effort to advance the state of the network from the copper infrastructure to the fiber infrastructure, which is much more robust. Where we had fiber, the fiber was fine. Fiber doesn't mind getting wet. Copper turns into green dust when it gets wet, particularly with salt water, as happened here. And if it doesn't turn into green dust on the first day, it turns into green dust eventually as the inevitable corrosion
You've learned
occurs.
more chemistry through this process.
It's a
return.
return.
It's very impressive.
Yes, green dust. That's a technical term. So we took advantage of that and have made a very, very large investment here in Lower Manhattan to transform this part of Manhattan into a state-of-the-art, the financial district and all Lower Manhattan, into an absolute state-of-the-art telecom infrastructure. I don't think that people frequently hold up Singapore. They hold up This is a concentrated area with more commerce and people, and it has been transformed into a glowing fiber hub. So I think that we have utilized that. We've also moved we've moved some customers onto wireless service, where that was a more logical solution for them. As you know, many people, certainly my children, and I assume the numbers bear out that it's over 30% now, don't have a landline.
Yeah.
They have wireless service. They're very happy with wireless service as their sole service, and so getting people to think about the services they have and whether they want to go back to a landline service or they're happy with their wireless service is an issue that sometimes just doesn't arise until something like this happens. So we've had some very good reaction to our VoiceLink product, which is a consumer product, and we have other business products that are wireless only. So that part of the rebuild was a decision that we made, put the energy behind it, and we've been dealing with the inevitable issues that arise from that. I mean, we have a large number of constituencies that we care very dearly about, our customers, we have regulators, we have our employees. There's lots of people who want to have a say in this, and in fact do have a say. So we've been working with all of them to bring them along on the notion that this is a real benefit to Manhattan and has to be brought forward. There's no sense really in thinking about building new copper infrastructure or when you have fiber capabilities and wireless capabilities that Verizon has to provide service. We were very attuned to the emergency management issues that arose. The immediate need for connectivity by wireless service was very important to us. Our network never went down in Lower Manhattan. It was stressed, as everyone's network was, by the fact that so many of the cell stations in Lower Manhattan were affected by the loss of commercial power. Right. And in Manhattan in particular, it's difficult to have backup power in every instance because the antennas are tucked into small places and sides of buildings. No landlord wants to have a generator.
There is no extra space in Manhattan
for generators,
period,
and you can't have fuel above the basement. Right. So there's a whole lot of logistical and other issues associated with backup power in Manhattan. But as the power came back on, the wireless network was extremely resilient. And while it was difficult to make calls in the morning after, that network started bouncing back very, very quickly. And we placed, of course, what we call cell on wheels, cows, cells on light trucks, Colts. It's sort of a we're very.
Do you get to take over the marketing of these acronyms?
A very animal friendly
nice.
sort of
That's
approach to beef up the wireless capabilities in the areas that happen. And we still, as I say, as some of the shore islands come back and which had taken longer because people weren't going to go out and rebuild until they were sure of what the rebuilding rules would be. Yep. And until the weather got a little warmer, no one was out there rebuilding on these islands. We are there. We are there to help with the transitions and to help them as they rebuild their homes. So it was quite an occupy. It was a very galvanizing moment. But Verizon is the DNA of Verizon is that these are crises that we are really attuned to dealing with. We have a an utterly dedicated workforce. They recognize that and are proud of the services they bring to people. They're proud of being able to go back and help people, and the outpouring of dedication and work associated with rebuilding these services and getting people back up and running was very heartfelt. Everyone was galvanized toward this as making sure we run this as precisely as possible, and this is something that we're tremendous at, and it showed during the whole Sandy episode.
Well, I mean, I think you're obviously an incredibly important part of the whole. When people talk about the infrastructure, you know, communications infrastructure is now, if it isn't the most important, it's about as important as any other part of the infrastructure. Talk a bit more specifically about your wireless business. I'm not going to ask you about the Vodafone. There's been a lot of buzz lately about a potential transaction involving Verizon buying out Vodafone or taking over the entire wireless operation. I won't ask you about the transaction, but people might not conventionally know about the relationship you have with Vodafone, and all they know is Verizon Wireless. Just talk a little bit about what that relationship is today, you know, putting aside any future deals, and how did it come about and how does it work?
Well, so Verizon Wireless was created out of the assets of Bell Atlantic, 9X, and GTE, and the former AirTouch Cellular. And AirTouch Cellular was owned by Vodafone. Vodafone is a very large UK-based, United Kingdom-based cellular carrier. They have operations all around the globe. And they bought AirTouch Cellular really just prior to the merger of Verizon Wireless, the mergers that made up Verizon Wireless. So as Verizon Wireless was being put together, AirTouch Cellular, it became logical. AirTouch Cellular was an outgrowth of PacificTel that was their cellular properties. So in 2000, when the joint venture, when the properties were put together, when AirTouch Cellular was contributing its properties, or Vodafone was contributing its properties, it ended up with a 45% holding in the partnership that is Verizon Wireless. So Verizon owns 55% of that partnership, and Vodafone owns 45% of that partnership.
And that's the business that you're still, that's the partnership that exists today.
Yes, exactly. That is the Verizon Wireless partnership. It has since accreted things like Alltel and other. Right. It's become larger through acquisition and through the benefits of its network and being so attractive to customers. But Verizon retains managerially control of the entity, its operations. Vodafone is a financial partner in that operation, and that's the status quo. And right. So as we have expressed for years that we, while we're perfectly happy to have them as a partner, we'd be perfectly happier to have the 45% right. be part of Verizon, and that is what has been part of the brouhaha in the last few weeks.
Well, look, I've got many more questions, topics that we didn't get to in terms of particularly your whole public policy agenda. I'd like to have you come back and finish the conversation next week. And for now, I'm Howard Homonoff. This has been Media Reporter, and thank you very much for joining us.